Hi, my name's Kayla Murphy, and today I'm here to talk a little bit about fusion. So what is fusion? Well, fusion is a type of nuclear power, and there are two main types of nuclear power. One is called fission, and one is called fusion. Fission is what you see in nuclear power plants, and it's where you take an atomically massive element, something like plutonium, and you break that down into smaller elements along with some extra mass. And that extra mass becomes energy, which then powers these plants. In fusion, it's sort of the opposite, but sort of the same. And what I mean by that is that you take two smaller elements and fuse them into a larger element, and then there's also extra mass in that process coming from those two smaller elements. And that extra mass is converted into energy. And so it's incredibly energy dense, and it is in fact what powers the sun. And in the sun, it's so massive, it's got so much weight and mass to it, rather, that the core of it can become incredibly dense and incredibly hot. And those are the two conditions that you need for a fusion reaction to take place. Here on the Earth, we can't do the same things, and so instead we have to go about it in a very different way. The way that we typically go about it is using what you can see on the right, which is the tomahawk reactor. The tomahawk reactor uses magnets to heat and suspend a plasma in midair, so it heats it up to hundreds of millions of degrees Celsius and keeps it in midair so it doesn't burn anything, and thus the conditions for a fusion reaction have been created. So let's talk about some of the differences between fusion and fission. In fission, you create long-lasting nuclear waste that you have to go and bury out under a mountain or something like that. And there are also problems in that, we can have a Fukushima, we can have a horrible meltdown, which changes the local environment for an incredibly long time. And then fission also has very dangerous fuels which can be turned into nuclear weapons. Fusion has none of these problems. So let's talk a little bit about the potential for fusion to address climate change. Now, fusion can, if properly realized, will essentially be a silver bullet to the climate crisis, in that it can create nearly infinite amounts of zero carbon energy in reactors that can run anytime. And so you don't have to worry about batteries storing energy from solar panels or something like that. And because it can create nearly infinite amounts of zero carbon energy, you can use that energy to power direct air capture technology. So you can take carbon right out of the air and store that either underground or in some sort of long-lasting object. And in that way, it makes China and other countries' emissions essentially irrelevant because we have enough energy to actually pull carbon out of the atmosphere. So if it's such a silver bullet, then you may ask yourself why it hasn't already been achieved. Well, in the 1950s, scientists thought that fusion would be able to be achieved in about 30 to 50 years. And yet today, we still think that fusion is about 30 to 50 years away. And so some have come to hypothesize that maybe fusion is always going to be 50 years away. In other words, that it will never occur. However, I don't think this is the case. I just think it's incredibly difficult to create the conditions for fusion to occur. And while we have achieved fusion, we've not yet produced net energy from fusion reactions. So we've produced fusion within plasma, within tomahawks, but we have had to spend more energy than we've been able to pull out of that fusion reaction. Now, what's set to turn this around is ITER, which is a collaborative project between 35 countries to create the largest tomahawk reactor ever made. ITER is specifically designed to produce net energy, and its successor, DEMO, is is going to take the advancements of ITER and make them commercially viable. So right now, this is ITER and demo are on kind of like a 30-ish year schedule to be properly realized. However, we have a climate crisis which is affecting us in the modern day. So we need something in the 10 to 15 year range, you know? And so something I've begun to wonder lately is with COVID-19, the vaccines were developed incredibly quickly, far more quickly than anybody thought was possible, because governments slashed red tape in order to get companies to able to achieve these results quickly. They promoted the funding of them to an incredible degree, and nearly everybody on the planet was thinking about COVID-19 and the vaccines. So I wonder if we can use a similar sort of energy towards fusion. If I wonder how quickly we could actually achieve it. Anyway, I'm going to hand things over to my partner, Austin.
Thanks, Caleb. Hi, everyone. My name is Austin Turner, and as Caleb mentioned before, we are presenting on nuclear energy. Before I move on to further business, I just want to make a quick correction in terminology from earlier. When Caleb was talking about the Tomahawk technology being used in the current ITER and demo projects, he actually meant to say tokamak. Anyways, I'll be expanding further on fusion as a potential future energy source, but with a focus on what specifically can be done. This process starts with identifying a government institution that commands the authority to enact changes regarding the United States' contribution towards fusion energy. I found that the U.S. Department of Energy handles the majority, if not all, of the decisions regarding resources devoted towards fusion energy. In fact, as you can probably guess from their namesake, they are responsible for anything energy related in the United States. Here is their mission statement, taken directly from the agency's website. The mission of the Energy Department is to ensure America's security and prosperity by addressing its energy, environmental, and nuclear challenges through transformative science and technology solutions. I found it very interesting that the mission statement, which is literally a description of the entity's entire reason for existing, chose to distinguish between nuclear challenges and energy challenges, as if they don't fall under the same category. This provides a segue into my next topic. Opportunities for action. There's this thing called the Death Valley Curve. This is a term often used among venture capitalists for when a startup company, or in this case the fusion industry, must operate using only the initially invested capital because they cannot yet generate revenue for one reason or another. In the case of fusion energy, while the payoff for invested parties has the potential to be enormous, the technology is not quite ready to be commercialized due to the imbalance of energy input and output that Caleb mentioned earlier, meaning that all parties that have devoted resources to fusion energy have not yet seen returns. In the capital-driven economy of the United States, this is seen as quite a problem. This brings me to the topic of the Department of Energy's budget distribution, and how it relates to the oddity I point out in the mission statement earlier. When looking at the Department of Energy's 2021 fiscal year fact sheet, we can see the budget breakdown. After doing some calculations, just under 9% of the entire $35.4 billion requested budget is to be devoted to the innovations for affordable, reliable, and efficient energy sources, which consist of renewable energy, fossil energy, and nuclear energy. It's not specified exactly how much of that actually is given to nuclear energy. In contrast, nearly 56%, or $19.8 billion of this proposed budget will be devoted to the National Nuclear Security Administration to maintain an effective nuclear deterrent. Interesting, don't you think? A conclusion could be made that a future in cleaner energy is taking a backseat to defense spending, even within the Department of Energy. This is further supported by taking a look at the most recent December 2020 Fusion Energy Sciences Advisory Committee, FESAC for short. Their public meeting minutes for this actually. FESAC advises the DOA Office of Science on complex matters pertaining to nuclear energy. In a nutshell, the FES laid out its long-term plans for the advancement of fusion energy and brought up that with the current trends and budgets allotted to them, that the DOE will not be able to pay for the long-term actualizations of said plans. It was suggested here that the DOE should request permission from Congress to start a public-private partnership, or PPP for short. This would allow the DOE to co-fund projects with commercial entities to expedite progress in the commercial fusion sector. This is the golden ticket. This is how we get things rolling. Further research yielded that there was private industries that are already heavily investing in fusion technologies. Among the most surprising of them are giant oil and gas companies, Chevron to be specific. Finally, for our conclusions and recommendations, fusion has definitely got a great many benefits over fission. Benefits that could change the world would be carbon capture technology. This could render other countries' future emissions irrelevant, so we don't have to worry about squabbling and bickering with everyone anymore. Then it would also contribute to zero carbon emissions immensely. Fusion is feasible, but are we going to make it there in time? People are getting impatient. We will call the DOE to action in this case. We're going to ask them not to divert spending from defense, but instead allow the commercial entities to partner with the DOE to expedite progress into the commercial fusion sector. This way, it's a win-win scenario. Thanks, everyone.